follow up a little bit on Venerable Tarpa's motivation this morning. I thought it was very good and timely, in which she was pointing out mostly relax as a quality of mind that's useful to have. And I was thinking about, what makes us come to a monastery anyway? Somewhere in our life we have some inkling that the things we're doing are not totally satisfying. Maybe it's a big insight, maybe it's just a little kind of thing that scratches at the back of our mind. But somewhere, if we thought this was all perfect, beautiful fun, and we were going to live happily ever after, then it wouldn't occur to you to go spend time at a monastery, whether it's 3 days or, the rest of your life. So there's that aspect of it. And then there's the aspect that says, I've heard about the Buddha's teachings, or I've studied the Buddha's teachings, or I have some experience of the Buddha's teachings, and there's something in there that really speaks to me. So this kind of longing or curiosity, or maybe there's a better way comes up in our mind, or maybe there's something about the way I think life would be if I weren't so frenetic comes to mind. But some spark about wanting to find something different, something better, maybe, than what I have experienced is what drives us to come. And we come with different levels of confidence in the Buddha's teaching. But what I think we can say absolutely without equivocation, is whatever that moment comes where we say, I'm going to go check this out, is coming out of a place of wisdom in our own minds. If it's totally coming from an affliction, totally coming from some fantasized way, then people don't last a few minutes. But I think if there is that sense of there's got to be a better way and the Buddha's teachings speak to me, that's coming from a wisdom place. So for one thing, that's worth trusting. That mind or that thought or that questioning, right? And so we come, and then what? Whether it's for a short stay, but I'm really talking about longer term stays here now. Now we've got a few things going on. One is we've been living our lives at 95 miles an hour, and all of a sudden, literally, we are putting on the brakes. That is a shock to the system. We have lived in a little cocoon of our own making that we probably don't even recognize. I know I didn't. Where everything around me in my world was designed to reflect back exactly who I thought I was, how I thought I should be, to give me back this perfect image of this being I was trying to be. It wasn't a conscious creation, but I worked very hard at creating this world where it was reflected back to me what I thought I was. And all of a sudden you come to the monastery and there's that mirror is gone. It's not there. People aren't reflecting back. In fact, they're reflecting back something I never thought I'd see. Or, it's shocking what gets reflected back. Not something I'm used to seeing because, personally, I was very good at getting out of those situations and finding the good mirror. Right? So that also is a shock to the system. We have spent our lifetime listening to music, going out to dinner, hanging out with friends, being with people who've known us for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, who hold us in a certain way. All that's gone. It's a shock to the system. So I think when you come to the monastery, any monastery, at first there's this feeling about, this is really nice, this is really peaceful. And then as time passes, the sound of our own mind starts to get louder, 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 louder. And maybe we're not even used to listening to the sound of our own mind. So that too is a shock to the system. And then we start paying attention to what that mind is saying, and that can be horrifying. So there's a lot of shock to the system. Especially in the beginning, but I have to say I'm not sure that it ever actually stops. Not that it doesn't that you begin to recognize it, But, part of what the Buddha has, and I think what draws people, the Buddha was telling the truth about the nature of reality. And we've spent our whole lives creating and recreating these houses of cards about who we think we are, but somehow we know that's not true. But when the cards start to fall off, we're naked. Like, who's here? And it ain't so pretty, necessarily. So I think it's very important to cultivate early on a sense of humor. And this idea about relaxing with who we are, where we are, how we are, in order to give ourselves the space to just experience that wisdom mind called us into something. And maybe it takes courage, you might say that, but I think even more important than the courage is the willing to relax and be with what is revealed as we follow that wisdom mind. The alternative is always, I think, we can always go back and listen to some more music, but it's not going to get at that thing that twanged us in the first place and invited us to come in. So for sure, training here is created in a space so that there's no sense of outcome. So whatever expectations we have to look at it. Am I feeling pressured? I must have an expectation of myself. Am I feeling stressed out? I have an expectation of myself. Am I discouraged? I go there easily. Why? Because I have expectations of myself. So accepting who we are, where we are, how we are, is a part of being able to practice the Dharma. Right? So I wanted to give a little tip. I've been relying a lot on this book, Living with an Open Heart, by Venerable Thupten Chodron and Dr. Russell Coates, which combines psychology and Dharma for tips on how to cultivate compassion in everyday life. There's a big section that talks about how, it's not a big section, these are all in little chewable bites, but there is a kind of a section of the book early on that talks about the obstacles to developing compassion, which I think really, although they don't say it in these words, they're defining the obstacles to practicing the Dharma. And they're the internal obstacles about the pressure that we put on ourselves of not accepting what we're feeling, not knowing what we're feeling, letting ourselves be run by that, then not accepting what's there, but really trying to fight and run away from what's happening, and then we're spending all our energy in kind of denial and questioning and so forth, rather than actually learning to observe, stay present with our situation, and then deal with it from that, then cultivating the wisdom that knows how to deal with it. Right? So, I believe this is Russell's chapter, but it's an interesting thing on how to just think. So if we're feeling pressure or stuff coming up, or we're feeling tight and not so comfortable, these are simple steps. First, notice that that's what we're doing. This is kind of our basic ground here, is to start paying attention to what's going on in our mind. Maybe we don't know what's going on in our mind until we just observe what's going on in our body. Sometimes for some people the body is the cue. But if there's any sense of dis-ease or dissatisfaction, then that's a good clue to stop and go, something's happening. I wonder what that is. And to get curious about our own minds. As Venerable Chodron says, once you start practicing the Dharma, you're never bored, because you can always investigate your mind. That's our practice. What's going on in here? Why? And so the steps for this mindful check-in: first, bring your attention to your breath. Right there, we've started to level things out. You can keep your mind going there. Now, if you get hung up about, oh my gosh, I can't even pay attention to my breath, and spin off from there, that's not the point. The point is to let having that attention to your breath bring your mind and your body sort of into sync, really, and to a more stable, even, neutral place. Then shift your attention to the external bodily sensations. So this really brings you into your body. You get a sense of what's happening, the temperature, the feeling of pressure, those kinds of things. Shift your attention to your internal bodily sensations. So you become aware of what's your body saying to you. Are you feeling hungry? How's your breathing? Are you feeling cold or warm? Sometimes we get so disconnected from ourselves that we don't even know what's happening in our bodies, right? So this brings us to our attention to ourself. So we're going to look first at the external stimulus, then the internal bodily sensations, then notice your mind. As Venerable often uses, what's the feeling tone, or what's the flavor of my mind in this moment? It's a nice general way of assessing. What's the flavor? Is it peaceful? Is it irritated? Is it sort of depressed? Just notice. No judgment, no fixing, just what's the flavor of my mind? Is there an emotion behind it is the next step. Is there an emotion that's present there that's sort of coloring that flavor? And so being aware of these things takes us to the next step, which is in a whole other chapter, and there's a whole other list of things. But what we've really been focusing on in this class in Spokane for some weeks is then we see what's there, and then we accept it. It's really important to just accept this is what it is. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to be feeling. I want to be in a better mood. I mean, I should be happy. I should be blah, 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 blah. Forget it. This is where I am. And from there, we can then decide, is this clear enough for me to know that there's an antidote? And maybe we need to learn what the antidotes to the mental states are. That's okay. That's part of our education. It's like, oh, okay. This is something I want to learn. Why? Because it's useful. Not because it's just like theory I need to know, because it's really applicable and useful. This is how the Buddha's teachings helps us learn to be a doctor to our own mind. But accepting is the very first step. And so part of accepting then also, to go back to Venerable Tarpa's motivation this morning, is to relax with what is and give ourselves the space and time to recognize that all these things have changed. There's no momentous decision we have to make today or tomorrow or next week. There's no deadline that says I have to have experienced this much of Dharma realization before next Thursday or I'm going to get thrown out of the monastery. I mean, I had that for a long time too. Not that I had to have the expectation, but always kind of like, I'm not going to make the grade. Well, what is that? That's my own judgmental mind. It's my own questioning mind. Oh, they won't, blah, 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 blah. They won't accept me. I won't be good enough. I'm not learning fast enough. I don't know. I don't have a big enough background. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm too fat. I'm too slow. I'm whatever. All of those two things are our own self-centered thought going after our wisdom that said, go to the monastery, check it out. So, relax. That's really, I want to just reiterate Venerable Tarpa's thing. But use those steps. Use our practice. Use that mindfulness to sit down with our breath. Pay attention to the really gross sensations around us, the sensations within us, and let that guide us to begin to be aware of what's going on in our mind. We have to know ourselves in ways that society has never taught us to know ourselves, in order to be able to practice and really take in what the Buddha is trying to tell us, how the Buddha is trying to help us. So I really recommend this book as a study, actually, and you can order it on those out there. You can order it on Amazon, but then a new book's coming out, a new version is coming out in February, so you can get it here in the States. But very, very much about accepting ourselves and bringing compassion into our own practice and understanding our own mind so that we have all the inner material we need to make the space, and as much space as we need to take in order to know where we want to go on the path. So, take the pressure button off. That's the undo it.